Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome to the post-show wrap-up of the Shrimp Tank. I'm Brad Berger, along with my co-host Dan Wheaton. And our guest today is David Nelson with the Kitsap Sun. And of course, we're coming to you from the Wheaton Unleashed Studios. We just had an intriguing and fun conversation with David. To listen to the entire podcast, visit us on the World Wide Web at shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle or subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. We're always interested in your feedback, so please do not forget to rate us. You can also now catch us on iHeartRadio and Google Podcasts. So, David, you've been in the newspaper business during a pretty interesting period of time, from 2009 to now. We're kind of bookend by a couple of financial crises. There's been a lot of disruption in the, quote, newspaper business, the print business during that period of time. How do you find it to be able to stay relevant kind of in the changing society?
One of the things, actually, on the podcast, we talked about some of the digital presence and use of social media. And obviously that's a big part of acquiring audience these days because so many people are there. One thing I didn't talk about is one of our core principles is also the in-person, that there is a tangible print product, there's a kind of a virtual digital product, but there's also people. And what we do is we have kind of a series of in-person events. We try to do at least once a month. Sometimes election season, we'll have an extra one in there if we get people together for, we've rented out a theater in downtown Bremerton. We've rented out breweries and had them before when we have candidates come in, or we do a kind of a storytelling type thing. It has to do with the news, but it's a way for people to not only appreciate, they want to read the stuff we're doing, but they also get to know us as people, which I think is a really important part of being a local media. You got to know them. It fights against, you brought up the question about political bias and what you see in the national media. Well, when you know me, maybe you'll think I'm biased, but at least you get to ask me what I am. You know me as a person. And so I think that's a big advantage we have, and we can still do that. And that's where we put that focus. Maybe that answers the question.
So Brad, I may be coming from the Wheaton Unleashed studio. It looks like you're coming from someplace warmer, just saying. So to David, one of the cool things we talked about, and I think really moving forward, how journalism is moving, even for local regional papers, is live streaming. And I'd like you to talk about how social media and live streaming is becoming a real part of your paper.
Sure. It started for us, and I know you're aware of this, covering the North Kitsap Vikings when you were working up there, but Game of the Week was an idea we had a long time ago, far before a lot of newspapers were getting into this kind of thing. And that was going out to a Friday night football game. And we worked with the local public access station so we could broadcast it there, broadcast it on our website, use the social media to broadcast some clips there. And so we started it with sports, which is a natural one. And then it's evolved. And like we talked about on the podcast, running out to a fire, people get to see a story in a way that they never would have before, because you're actually watching this as it happens. Getting reactions from someone who's just been elected to office is another interesting example we talked about, that sure, we can read what they say, but to see their face, to see their voice, and how they do that. So I think that's a tool that will continue to be used. And the social media platforms have made it simple to use. They keep improving those sorts of tools we can use. So we might as well take advantage of them.
Well, David, one of the questions that I asked you on the podcast was really intended to really evoke a response that I didn't expect. But tell us a little bit about what it's like in today's age to be a newspaper carrier.
Well, it's a great question, because a lot of people have a romantic idea of when they spent their childhood riding a bicycle around and throwing papers. That's not how it works. And it's a great, like a business case study almost, is to understand how there's all these market forces. Gas prices is a market force. The space between houses, how circulation changes and shrinks, frankly. The rural nature as people build into the suburbs and you space out where they're going. And then also our whole delivery system is also influenced by where press plants are. We do not print in our building any longer, and almost every newspaper tells that same story. The Seattle Times, they closed their press. They've sold off their Bothell office. The Tacoma News Tribune no longer prints there. And so there are not that many facilities, and that then cascades down into where the carriers congregate to get drops, how it's a network. And then I was telling you also about economic pressures. When minimum wage goes up, you may not need the part-time job. When the economy is booming with kind of other low wage jobs, you may not need this one. When retirement income changes, you may not need that little bit. And then other people who are really consolidating that to build a business, and it's a good way to do that too. So there's all these different forces that go into how a newspaper gets to your doorstep each day.
Well, David, we want to thank you for sharing with us. Everybody's going to need to listen to the whole podcast because we had some really fascinating discussions. If somebody wants to subscribe or find you online or anything like that regarding the Kitsap Sun, how do they do it?
I hope everyone wants to subscribe. Go to kitsapsun.com. Right now we have an offer. I think it's 3 months for $3, kind of an intro offer for digital subscribers. That's our lifeblood right now. That's what has been growing for us, quite frankly, and it's making this a healthy business right now. Kitsapsun.com, you should see a link kind of up in the right-hand corner on where you
and
can...
you're a shrimp peeler sponsor, so thank you for that.
So we want to support you guys and what you're doing for businesses also.
Well, once again, this is just a taste of what you can expect by listening to the entire podcast. Visit shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle or subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. We'd love to hear from you, so please do not forget to rate us. Also, don't forget, you can also find us on iHeartRadio and now on Google Podcasts.
Well, Brad, we're going to keep doing this as long as this crisis is going on. We have a commitment to do it. We have our next show in 2 weeks, April 22nd. Anna Choi from Conscious Business Coaching will be our next guest. Until then, and for right now, the hay is in the barn.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.